Okay, welcome everybody to this roundtable discussion on the RSC and Orphan of Zhao. Basically, in the kind of discussion that we're going to have, hopefully we will have a kind of discussion amongst the panel for roughly about an hour or just over an hour. And then I think all of us would very much like to open out and have a much broader discussion, not only about the implications of this particular issue, but also where things go next, what happens after this, and exactly how this becomes a starting point as opposed to an end. Just to begin really, as a kind of introduction, I'd just like to read out the kind of call, as it were, that we've kind of put out around this roundtable. I know probably all of you have read it already, but I think it's a good thing just to kind of have in mind. And it begins with a quote from Rustom Bharucha, which says, "Unavoidably, the production raises the question of ethics, not just the ethics of representation, which concerns the decontextualisation of an epic from its history and culture, but the ethics of interacting with people. In the process of creating the work itself, it is at the level of interactions that the human dimensions of interculturalism are at once most potent and problematic." I mean, interestingly, I think, when he talks about the production, of course he's talking about Peter Brook's Mahabharata decades ago. Yet here we are finding that the production could equally relate to the Orphan of Zhao. So it's been more than 20 years since Rustom Bharucha offered his view from India. Yet similar charges of cultural imperialism have recently been levelled at the Royal Shakespeare Company by British East Asian actors and academics as well, I should say. The RSC's production of The Orphan of Zhao, a 13th-century Chinese play, attributed to Ji Junxiang and sometimes referred to as the Chinese Hamlet, I don't know what people make of that term, requires a cast of 17, yet only 3 of the cast are British East Asian, 2 cast as puppeteers and a 3rd as the Maid. For more than 30 years, and I think at least since the casting of Miss Saigon in 1990, if not long before that, the lack of British East Asian representation in the performing arts has been critiqued and challenged. In his defence of the casting of The Orphan of Zhao, the artistic director of the RSC, Gregory Doran, asserted that, and I quote, "Having absorbed something of Chinese conventions and dramatic idioms, we want to approach the play with a diverse cast and develop our own ways of telling this ancient story and thus explore its universality." So, I'm delighted to introduce this panel. Actually, I'm not going to introduce them, I'll ask them to introduce themselves. I think that's kind of the best way. My name is Dr. Ashley Thorpe. I'm a lecturer in theatre at the University of Reading, and I research into Chinese theatre and British Chinese theatre.
My name is Anna Chen. I'm a writer, performer, poet, broadcaster, and I'm one of the British East Asian artists, such as we are now known, who fought this particular battle, although I think most of us in our own ways have been fighting these battles going back, way back when.
I'm Dr. Amanda Rogers. I'm a lecturer in human geography at Swansea University, and I do research on Asian American, British East Asian and Singaporean theatres and looking at the kind of interconnections between them.
I'm Dr. Brook Chow, and I'm a lecturer in theatre studies at Brunel University, and my research is much more focused on labour and work in contemporary performance. And what drew me to this was that I trained as an actor in Vancouver, where I'm from, and I originated the role of Tui in the Vancouver production of Miss Saigon. So when all of this came up about The Orphan of Zhao, it really resonated with my own experiences.
Yeah, my name's Daniel York. I'm an actor, filmmaker, writer, musician, all-round troublemaker. As an actor, I did actually work for the Royal Shakespeare Company once upon a time, as well as extensively with the Milan Theatre Company and other places like the Royal Court and stuff. And I'm currently vice chair of the Equity Minority Ethnic Members Committee. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. Can I begin by asking the panel just to kind of think about, I suppose, the contextualisation of this particular project? Because for decades there's been intercultural work in Chinese culture, theatre, drama and dance, and some of these projects have been initiated by East Asian actors or have included East Asian actors or British East Asian actors. Some have in a partial manner, and sometimes they've been completely excluded. So what is it that marks The Orphan of Zhao out as kind of specifically problematic, would you say?
I'll go first. Yeah, I won't go first again. I don't think it is particularly problematic. I think it's been problematic whenever it's happened, and it's happened for a long time. You know, going back, there's been a number of times when this has happened down the years. I remember I was just leaving drama school when Miss Saigon was on. I remember the protests outside the theatres. And I was struck because it had just become kind of unacceptable for a white man to play Othello. And my then agent at the time, we happened to be somewhere, they were showing news footage of people outside the theatre on Broadway. You know, not here, it didn't happen here, but, you know, with placards and stuff. And my agent sort of went, isn't that ridiculous? The ridiculous that people were protesting about it, which I found quite interesting as a kind of, you know, mixed race East Asian actor, you know, who was just starting out, and it's always struck me that we're very much a kind of I think of it as the third-class minority in this country. You know, you can't black up, you know, you can't really brown up anymore. You can yellow up, even if they're not actually painting themselves yellow in this production. That's effectively what they're doing, in my humble opinion. And there's been various, you know, I mean, I think around 10 years ago, the Young Vic Theatre did a play called The Soul of Chen Yu Leaves Her Body, and they did actually paint the eyelids. There was no East Asians in it at all. And I think it can't be more than 4 or 5 of us wrote letters about that. And you know, there's been various other ones as well. I think what enabled us to kind of make a big deal about this particular one were a number of factors. I think the fact Facebook and Twitter kind of enabled us. It went viral basically, and people got involved from all over the world. And so it just shot, and also I think that the fact that it's the Royal Shakespeare Company makes it very high profile. The fact also that they are such a huge recipient of taxpayers' money, I think it's £15 million a year, something like that, which, you know, is no small deal. We were able, you know, we're able to exploit that. Obviously, this is our taxes going into this, and the fact that, you know, and I'm not a believer in royalty, but the fact they're called the Royal Shakespeare Company means effectively they belong to all of us as subjects of the realm, you know, and so, you know, it looks extremely dodgy from that point of view, and I think all of that enabled us to kind of get on the thump the tubs or whatever you want to get on the soapbox and do it, and it was amazing the amount of support that came in, especially from America. I mean, quite moving actually, but this is what we have to do from now on. We have to make a huge noise about it, because there is this kind of idea amongst East Asian people that we're quite passive, and we're quite kind of, you know, we kind of let these things happen, and if we continue doing that, that's what happened time and time again. You know, I really believe this. You know, to quote the Beastie Boys, you have to fight for your right to party. You really do in this world, and I would hope there'll be more of this going forward.
I think what really kicked this off, because we have had, you know, Miss Saigon, we've had more light at the Arcola in the past, where some of us did kick up about that, and definitely it was the Twitter factor. And I think also what happened, because this particular battle had been going on for a while, I'd been vaguely aware of it. I knew that Dan was fighting this on Facebook, he was posting stuff. I think the thing that got us was when we heard what we thought at first was the 2 dogs and a maid, which was, that was absolutely the final straw. 3 out of 17, and they are playing 2 dogs and a maid, and that's what really caught fire, wasn't it? So the thing about the Orphan of Zhao is that I think there are deeper problems as well, because I don't actually think the problems would have been sorted even had two of the leading actors been played by East Asian people. It was just ignorant. It was Aladdin for the middle classes. It was incredible. There was a ninja in there, because our cultures are all the same. We know this. And the most startling and stunning moment for me, where I thought race and class came together, was the scene where the 4 ethnic actors, there was a young black woman in there as well as the 2 guys and the woman playing the maid. So 4 of them were sort of on their knees, subdued in a line across the diagonal at the back of the stage. The 3 white actors playing the doctor, his wife, and the nobleman were flouncing around in very RSC mode. And at that moment I thought, you're going Dan. I thought, I just thought, this can't be allowed to stand. So on so many levels, and I think unless you look at the deeper class issues as well, I don't think you're going to sort out just the race ones.
I think, just to pick up, it's some of the stuff that's already been said, but just the reproduction for me of the stereotype of East Asians as passive was the most problematic thing, and as voiceless, I suppose. So did the maid ever speak? Is that
she has one scene, and I counted up the pages. It's 2 and a bit pages where she is being interrogated about because they've heard the scream of a baby, so they suspect that the baby has been born, and she very bravely doesn't say anything. She is passive all the time. She doesn't do anything. Her one action is that she declines to give up the baby, but she does not. None of the characters, the Asian the characters played by Asian actors, push the plot forward. We are not in a protagonist or leading role. We are not the authors of our own culture, of ourselves, our own history.
So I think for me, the kind of reproduction of passivity within the actual form of the theatre production itself, it's almost too convenient that it seems that, well, you have a puppet, so it's mediating speech already. So there's somebody you're speaking through another object, and then the role of a maid being somebody who is subservient to the other characters. So that to me was the most problematic aspect of it. And in comparison to, I suppose, other intercultural work, I don't think in the past, when we would think about the big problematic productions, for instance, or any of Peter Brook's work, in fact. But Yoshi Ueda's role within those, productions, I don't think was ever so specifically reproducing an image of a Japanese man as passive.
No, I would agree with that. I think the big thing about this production compared to the others is, it's the RSC, and there's a certain precedent, there's a certain standard, there's a certain international cachet that comes with that company and has the bar set higher, and therefore we should expect higher of them as well. And I think there's also an increasing engagement with China, which is driven by economics, and therefore we are wanting to engage with China and understand it on a cultural level. But the problem is that this is being mediated by, in this instance, entirely white people, it would seem to my mind, apart from Ru Li, which I think there's interesting questions to be asked about her role within that, and I would like to know more about that. And I know she talked about that on the opening night, but I'd like to find out more about that, because it does seem to be, it comes over, I think, this passive image, all of these things appear very white Orientalist modes of representation within the play.
One of the things I found out about the kind of process of putting this together, and I don't know how much this is in the public domain, was that the production team very early on actually went to America, and they went to Michigan, and there was kind of a conference and a symposium about the play, and that the production team received short workshops by Chinese opera actors. Nevertheless, there's this kind of sense that the production team have been travelling the globe and picking bits up, and kind of bringing them together. And I just kind of wondered to what extent this production could be described as inherently imperialist, and what, if anything, could have been done to change it.
Where do you start? I mean,
I have a list.
This was utterly white man stuff. It was just everything. They didn't tape up their eyes, although there was a very dodgy photo that I know Dan took great pleasure in reproducing everywhere of the emperor. And I don't know whether he was going...
I know that actor as well. He's a lovely chap, by the way.
But
very good actor.
But that was quite scary. I mean, because another thing that was happening is there's no subtext. I was quite shocked. The characters all say exactly what is needed to push the plot forward step by painstaking mechanical step. And so I think what they're saying is when you say imperialist, they're owning the culture and saying, we don't have depth. Right, we have no subtext. We only say what and I'm going into that. Did you see the trailer as well with that hex and as well? So this is operating on a lot of different levels, and I really think it's imperative that we engage with the RSC not just to get more actors on stage, but I want them to know exactly what they are saying, to be able to hold up this snapshot of the four kowtowing ethnic servants and the three white main characters, and show that to them. And culturally they were getting stuff wrong, like it was very Confucian. It can't be the Chinese Hamlet, because in Hamlet you're exploring the depths of the human soul. How can you do that in a political system, which is what this is pushing, which is it's all the bloodline, it's the son, this child is so valuable as being the last of the clan, and the clan is a big subject in Chinese history, that the Doctor is prepared, because of course we don't value our own lives or the lives of our kith and kin. He hands over his own baby to be killed, and you hear the neck snap, and this Ming the Merciless villain Tuan Gu snaps the neck, and it's a bit sad, but never mind, because the orphan must grow up in order to avenge his family. Now, I don't think that mentality is actually. I think we have a lot more going for us than this. So there are all these assumptions.
I think I've got quite a lot to say about this, because this is one of the things I picked up on, with this idea that we were tripping around to China at taxpayers' expense, and we were going for a week. And I read the blog. I mean, when you look at the RSC website, it's incredibly informative about the whole worldview regarding this production, because it did feel like, we're tripping. And I could imagine, like, us going, look at that piece of architecture, let's take a photo. Or let's look at this, let's take a photo. And going to the market and trying to barter people down. And I really felt like it was a travel log. I mean, I teach kind of colonial and post-colonial geographies, and it felt like a travel log from the 19th century that I would show to my students and say, what would you say about power relationships inherent in this text? And it really felt like that. I think the costume designs, for me, were quite something else as well, the kind of terracotta warrior modelling, but also for me, the facial hair within those signified really an Asian protagonist within those roles, or Asian features within those faces. So even though you weren't yellow facing, there's perhaps one step from it. And I could almost see somebody going in the makeup room, wouldn't it be good if we could just... And I just thought, we're that close from it. I have to say, I don't know whether we should say it is inherently imperialist, however, to do this kind of work. Because if you were to say, is this, then that would preclude white people, such as myself, from researching anything to do with China, India, anywhere else that I don't technically own or have any blood connection to. So I don't believe that you can call any kind of cross-cultural exchange inherently imperialist, but it's how you go about doing that. And in terms of... you were saying about justifying or rectifying this, and the idea that we are back from, we're 20 years forward from Peter Brook and the Mahabharata. And the thing about that production was that it generated such huge critical discourse around it. And since then, academics have pushed all of these things. We've explored intercultural exchange in huge and varied ways. Rosella's done it, Ashley's done it, in these really imaginative ways, really pushing things forward. And yet, the theatre industry has not kept pace with academic developments. So I think there is an onus on us as academics as well to make sure that our work and our theories and our findings get filtered back. Because there's pressures on us too, because we have to be continually producing stuff that's seen to be innovative, theoretically new. We have to be developing stuff all the time. So to go back and say, we're back in Peter Brook Orientalism circa 1980, someone will say, that's not new, we know that already, we're not going to publish that. So there's these kinds of tensions within the kind of knowledge system about how we can educate theatres and work with them as well that needs to be considered.
I think on the text itself, what is interesting to me, and I want to pick up on some of the things that Anna was saying, because this idea of bloodlines and that Confucian idea of everyone in his right place. That to me, if it's represented as something that is other, then it's very, very problematic. As if look at these crazy ideas that these people over here have. But at the same time, you know, my father always talks about Confucian ideas, and it's not like these things as for younger people or mixed people or people, you know, from the Chinese diaspora, it's not like these things don't matter. It's just that they matter and resonate in different ways. And if there's no, I suppose with James Fenton's adaptation of the text, if there's no sort of understanding about what kind of prior knowledge the audience might bring to this, or what type of reception the audience is meant to have of these ideas, then these ideas of balance don't actually mean what they're, I suppose, the great resonance that they could have as a text. Because I think that the text probably has a lot to say about Chinese history, because it is part of our history. So that to me is probably the most problematic part of it. It reminds me of when they decided, and it's cancelled now, but they were going to remake the movie Akira for new, I think it's New Manhattan, so instead of Neo Tokyo it would be New Manhattan. And as if that story of Akira and all of these, you know, this mutation and all of these things that can be presented as, look at these crazy ideas over here, as if that can be put in a different context and understood in the same way. Once you remove it from the context and not give any sort of indicators or signifiers as to how the audience should read it, then it becomes incredibly problematic.
Can I just follow on from that? I mean, I think the thing about James Fenton's, he wrote a piece in The Guardian about how he came to this. And I'd have some really choice quotes from this that I particularly take to. The play isn't written in verse, because originally it was, but it's written in a poetic style that suggests the feudal psychology of early China.
Where they thought in verse.
They thought in verse. The second quote, this, I hope, is the imagined language of a fearsome, distant kingdom.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, and I think it's unfortunate, because he was in this piece. He's really trying to engage with it, and he does try and capture how he imagines this poetic kind of Chinese songs and so on to be, and he actually gets confirmation from a Chinese academic or something that it sounds like something from the Book of Songs, but it's almost like, I'm so pleased with this and I'm really excited and I'm pleased at this, but on the other hand, again, it's this sense of I have mastered this cultural domain. So it's this tension between, oh, I'm drawn to it and I'm mastering it and I understand it, but I don't really. It's all these kinds of things in operation.
But can I say also that James Fenton piece was a doozy, and it's bullshit, and it's bullshit because what it's doing, it's covering, at the core of this is a sensationalist piece about blood and sex. They make it very clear that, so who's actually seen it? Who here has actually seen it? I think you should go to see it just as a car for Car Crash Theatre. They establish very early on that the emperor is a Nero-esque sort of, he's a sexual degenerate, and he's not just that he shoots, you know, at whim members of the public with impunity. They keep emphasising, you know, they don't show us, it's tell, don't show, that he is sexually degenerate. And the whole thing is infused with that, is absolutely for the middle classes in the Shires. And I apologise to anyone who is from the middle class in the Shires. very, very nice. But another moment for me was when they drop 4 heads to show how brutal they are. You know, 4 severed heads of the enemy of Tuan Gu, the villain, the piece. They are the colour of Peking ducks that you see hanging up in restaurants, right? Now, I last saw this. This wasn't the first time I've seen this. The last time I saw it was Turandot by, who was the, oh God, what was his name? The director. Anyway, at ENO, where they have in the palace the evil, psychotic, murdering princesses, the kitchen. They have her dead lovers, the colour of Peking ducks, hanging up in the kitchen, a place of food. So I want to know subconsciously, what are these people like Greg Doran, and James Fenton must have seen this. I mean, I can't remember, I don't think he wrote this actually into the piece, but what are they saying about us? at a subconscious level, below the text, what are they saying?
It's funny, I was in Brecht's Turandot at Hampstead Theatre, and I was one of the princess's dead lovers, and my head was, but I don't think I was the colour of keeping my particular favourite photo, though, I have to say, was the one of the orphan when he's grown up, obviously, and it's an actor, he's got his head shaved, and he's in this kind of gold kind of robe, and I looked at it and I thought, you're Brynner. It's funny, when I was reading this question this morning, the word imperialist, because it's a kind of word, you always think you know what it means, and we do. But I kind of stuck it in Google, and this came up. It says, the creation or maintenance of an unequal economic, cultural and territorial relationship based on domination and subordination. And to me, this absolutely, it's a classic kind of colonial grab in a way. They've kind of pillaged the goodies, and kind of locked us out of the process, which is, it's sort of like this work, which is supposedly one of the greatest Chinese plays ever written, has been kind of appropriated, but for people in who are in a fairly exalted position, leading RSC directors, leading RSC composers, leading RSC actors. They get to have this stuff and to further their careers. And obviously it's not as kind of cold as that. They wanted to make something good. We all understand that. But that's very much the case. And the interesting thing is what Anna was saying about the four minority. The dog is made. It's an equal opportunities dog. There's two East Asians and a black girl. The line of four bowing. I have to tell you this, having worked at the RSC, they're kind of laden with faux pas like that. I was in a production there of Herman Melville's Moby Dick, which sank like a whale, actually. It didn't do very well at all. But there were 9 of us in it, all men, and it was a physical theatre production. So and I'll talk about that in a minute. Naturally, there was me and there was 3 black actors in that company. We were the only people from any kind of background at all. And because there were 9 of us, at one point they put us in 2. They put four in one dressing room, 5 in the other. And we were all in the dressing room, and we looked around and oh my God, they've put all the minority ethnics and the Scotsmen in the same dressing room. And all the middle class public school boys were in the other dressing room together, probably sipping pins. And I don't know if they realise they're doing that. Also, the kind of physical work we had to do in that production. I think the RSC hated that, but it cost them a fortune in physio's fees because we all, we had to climb up ropes and stuff like that. And it's like, I remember watching Wild Swans earlier this year, which did have an all East Asian cast, but how hard they were working on stage, hauling cement around and everything. You always see this with minority ethnic actors. They have to be physical. They have to do, they have to haul things around. And you sometimes see working class Caucasian actors do that, but generally the kind of the privileged classical theatre acting elite, which is made up very much of public school educated, Oxbridge educated, white middle class boys and girls, get to kind of sit around on chaise longues and kind of be nuanced with text and stuff and look clever, whereas we have to work like dogs. There's a clear class structure in the theatre, I have to say, and to me, in many ways, it's the last bastion of that stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Can I ask Anna, did you see any of this Chinese opera movement? Was that visibly noticeable?
No, there was a photograph. We were expecting the worst because we saw the photograph of Ruru doing that,
yes.
And they're all in a line doing.
Yes.
Thank God. Now I don't know if it was because anything to do with us.
We were waiting to pounce. Yeah.
They didn't, thank God. But I have noticed, they were using the photograph of the Chinese kid on all their publicity. I've noticed now that they're doing an offer for 40 quid. Have you noticed they've changed the photo? and it's the actual actor, because one of our complaints was, you haven't got the courage of convictions, have you? You haven't got photos of the white guy playing the Orphan of Zhao, but now they have.
I think one of the things that has really made this difficult for the RSC has actually been their own response to criticism.
Yes.
And they're kind of persistent, pushing the line of it's okay, this is universal. It's
Yeah.
okay, we're not dealing with specifics.
Yeah.
It's okay, this is about the culture of everybody, so we're actually including everyone even though we're not.
They said it wasn't Chinese at one point.
In fairness, I wouldn't want to be defending that one. I have to say, I wouldn't want to be going into bat on that wicket.
But note that James Fenton it's been made very clear, because they didn't even give the Chinese, the best known version, the 13th century version, they didn't even give him a credit for it, because James Fenton has amassed everything and he has come up with this jolly new... So he takes full responsibility, I think, for the writing of this. He can't blame that one on ancient. He could have done something amazingly new. They could have done... I mean, I thought that the movie of Flash Gordon was better than this. You had Ming
fine film.
Because I loved it. Because it was... Brian Blessed, how marvellous. Yeah. Because this was set in the future and they were taking from bits. And okay, the East Asians got to be the villains, but okay. They could have done something new with this. Instead, they wanted to cherry pick and take the best bits for themselves, and not even think. I think as an intellectual exercise, it's bloody awful, and I don't know how they deserve their funding.
Okay. Moving on. RSC has previously adopted colourblind casting in its projects. It's something that it has pointed to really in defence of its position. Can I ask the panel what's gained and what's lost in this approach, and how could or even should it have been applied here?
It really bothers me that the term colourblind casting has now been appropriated and gets used by people to defend situations like this. It happened in the More Light one. I remember our dear friend Ian Shuttleworth in the Financial Times. I absolutely use that one. This is colourblind casting. Do you not see? Everyone's white. It's colourblind casting. And it's worth remembering that colourblind casting was a mechanism that was designed to create opportunities for people from minority backgrounds who wouldn't otherwise have opportunities, not to protect the privilege of the dominant social racial demographic, which is, and to me, this is rampant protectionism. It's not. I mean, I know. I mean, I've actually had a meeting with the RSC about this, and they in a way they're being very nice about it, but they couldn't quite get their head around the fact that this is not a diverse cast. I don't know how you call that diverse when it's a cast of 17. 7 of them are from minority ethnic backgrounds. However, 5 of those are in subordinate roles. The Moroccan Yusuf is playing kind of guards and things, isn't he? And there's a black girl who's one third of the dog, and there are 2 mixed race black actors who are playing leading roles. That to me is not that's not diverse. That's a predominantly white cast with a few frills, and
it's reinforcing their hierarchy.
Well, I
Mark
couldn't agree
Shenton
more.
view that 3 was quite. What was it he said? What did Mark Shenton say? 3 was quite generous.
Quite generous under the circumstances. Yeah. If what was I saying? It's not colourblind. It's not diverse. It's not multicultural. It just isn't, and it kind of reinforces also where we are in the theatre with regards to minority ethnic groups. Your average kind of bastion of the British theatrical establishment, when they want to show how edgy and rad they are, they'll cast a couple of black actors. If they want to be really sexy, they'll cast a couple of South Asian actors. They'll generally only even look at East Asians if they're not doing anything particularly, So it's absolutely not. If how it could have been used in this case, if you're going to make it, I mean, personally, if this play was standalone, I would have liked to have seen the majority, at least, of the cast being East Asian. As it's in repertoire with 3 other plays, which again is their defence, and they obviously couldn't countenance the idea of East Asian actors being in Brecht and Pushkin. Heaven forfend, though I think there's some of us from East Asian backgrounds who look far more Russian than they do. I think you would have to say you know, at least 2 or 3 of the actors in leading roles would have to be from East Asian backgrounds. I've had another 2 or 3 from other Asian backgrounds. You know, when it's kind of and it is interesting hearing those quotes about the Mahabharata, because I remember watching that on TV, you know, and going, wow, look at that, that's amazing. I might stand a chance of being in that, you know, if you, do you know what I mean? And so it's interesting that got criticised, but this compared to the Mahabharata is just like we're back in the 80s basically.
But did you know the thing about it being a part of a trilogy with the Pushkin and Brecht? There was the term "no Chinese connection" was used. Now that was in the BBC, so I don't know whether it was a direct quote, but that was a summing up that basically the RSC's reason for not putting it, because of course, we would have loved to have put more in there, but the trouble was that there were these 2 other plays, and there was no Chinese connection. Now I thought that was something where I wanted to drill down and say, what are you saying then? We can't play anything unless there is a direct, specific connection. That we can't play anything that is us because that gives you guys the chance to grab these roles. I am British, and I happen to be of a Chinese heritage, but I could have been a bus driver. I could have been a villain and all those things. It was more likely that I'd be a landscape gardener or something like that. So you can't cast us just as part of British society. And that really, really did upset me and make me, because you are excluding me from my own culture, which is British, actually.
There were a couple points that I had, but I was struggling with the idea of thinking about Shakespeare and why we would even think of colorblind casting as a general issue at all. Because why is Rosalind in As You Like It a white character? You know, is it? Do we know if she is? We're not dealing in sort of Ibsenite realism at these points. When Shakespeare almost always involves a kind of act of cultural translation into a kind of Shakespearean stage, and that to me sort of opens it kind of universally. And the only one that we can sort of think about, because it is about race, is Othello. And maybe there's others, but I don't know the entire canon. But if you think about, you know, Midsummer Night's Dream, it's supposed to be in Greece, yes, supposedly, but we don't think of the kind of cultural authenticity around those sorts of productions. And then when you're thinking about Brecht and why, surely the RSC knows that Brecht doesn't require naturalism, because that's the point. So that to me became very problematic. There was another point though that I had that maybe goes on a slight tangent about just reflecting on my own sort of experience as an actor in Vancouver, which I know is different from here, but thinking about how these ideas of hierarchy within what gets put on stage becomes reproduced culturally. In the Philippines, for example, you know, the mestiza actresses are the ones on TV, you know, so the ones that are half Spanish or half Chinese and half Filipino, you know, those actresses are the ones that get put forward. And, you know, you can argue all you want about the fact that it's because it represents class, because they didn't work in the fields and they had lighter skin. It's not that. It's because the Philippines was colonized for a long time. And those kinds of attitudes, I found myself, you know, they were reproduced in the way that East Asian actors in Vancouver at least talked about themselves. About Kristen Kruk was one of the most famous ones who came from Canada and became quite well known for Smallville, and you know, as a Hapa actress, so half white actress, she, you know, got all of this work and it became this, you know, interesting thing if like somebody thought that I'm mixed Chinese and Filipino, and some casting director commented, is part of your family white? And I went, oh, thank you very much, as if this was something to be celebrated. So the attitudes becoming reproduced within the actual culture of how we think of ourselves as actors. It's just a point for discussion.
Can I just add from that? I don't think the issue actually is colour-blind casting. I think it needs to be colour-aware casting, and I do think there is a difference with this. So for instance, I think actually that there was an Othello that was white. It's Patrick Stewart where they actually had the rest of the cast black. So that's a situation where, okay, we're playing around with these ideas of race and experimenting with them and trying to make some kind of political statement through it. And I think that that's, you know, fair play, because we're not in a post-racial society. We're not in a situation where we can have an Asian Hamlet with a black Gertrude and white Claudius. I mean, we're not there. So it's okay, well, we need to think, how can we get to that point? And unfortunately, this idea of colourblind casting isn't really working out as we would like. And I think these ideas around universalism, and this idea that we're all the same, but we're not really, is very much based on this idea of sameness rather than having shared characteristics. I think there's a distinction to be made around this. I think Jill Dolan makes this distinction about having shared universalisms versus a homogenizing thing which actually isn't equal at all. So the other thing I'd like to raise in this context is the all-black, all-South Asian productions that the RSC have recently done as well. Because I think that in a lot of the debates online, these were used as, oh, this is an example. Actually, the RSC does do colourblind casting. Oh, it does. Look, it does employ minority actors. Oh, look, they do all black, all Asian productions. But actually, I actually saw the all black Julius Caesar. I thought it was great. It was great to see, how can I put it nicely, a diverse range of abilities in a single production. But I think that's good, right? Because if you're a BME actor, you're never going to get that opportunity, you're never going to develop unless you get into those productions in the first place. So I kind of commend that, but on the other hand, when I watched that production, it was overlaid with all sorts of stereotypes around what we imagine Africa to be, the corrupt dictatorship, war, famine, all this kind of, and the soothsayer is this kind of indigenous, mystical shaman figure. And I just thought, oh, I'm so tired of this. And I would actually hate for the response of the RSC to be, oh, let's do a nice Chinese, all Chinese, high Orientalia production. That would be my worst nightmare, actually, because I'd rather see a much more mixed casts just doing Shakespeare. That's what I would rather see. And I think the other issue is one that Daniel has raised in the press about how the RSC operates. This cannot be colourblind casting because it's not about equal opportunities, it's about networks and how this feeds back into what we were saying earlier about class systems and how the RSC actually casts. It's all based on who you know, have you worked with them before, what kind of track record do you have, and these things feed into this so-called equal playing field that need to be considered.
I think I want to kind of move on to talk about reviews, perhaps before we talk about kind of institutional obligations. Yeah. And the reason that I want to talk about that is because it seems to me that the reviews have actually been fairly positive, and not all reviewers have kind of alluded to this debate, and those that have tended to say, yes, it only has 3 East Asian actors in it, but never mind, this shouldn't detract from what is otherwise a really great production. As a kind of attempt, in a way, to kind of depoliticise the production and to kind of separate artistic practice from the kind of sphere of political ideologies and issues of representation. I just kind of wondered how the response of the reviewers complicates this discussion.
I don't think it does. Did you say, I mean, because all the ones I've read have mentioned it?
Not all of them have. Not all of them. I can't remember exactly which ones haven't, but off the top of my head.
The local press didn't?
No, the local press would know. But they're kind of, kind of glorified gardening correspondents usually all the time. I mean,
Well, I've still been having a row with Ian Shuttleworth, the FT, still, and even yesterday on a friend's Facebook thread, he's very, very, very lefty, and he's marvellous. He's absolutely terrific, very supportive of us. But there are 3 white guys. At the end, I wrote my review for the Morning Star, and I did say at the end that it was, I saw that they were on the wrong side of history, and there were a lot of these old white gits, basically trying to convert paunch into punch and failing to lay a finger on us because they are in the bloody wrong. But still, see, this is the danger that all these ideas are. I think we are a Trojan horse for people who still hold these racist views, and I think it's very sad that only Tamasha.
Yeah, no,
we've had very little. We've had very little support from South Asian and black groups, because I'm just thinking of the the pastor near, first they came for the East Asians and said all this stuff because they wouldn't dare say it to you, and you're next down the line. It's actually in your interest to protect us, and I'm quite sad that they're being so short-sighted about this.
I was going to mention that actually. No, but in all seriousness about the local reviews, I've been in plays and the local reviews haven't noticed who's been on the stage or what's been going on. So I mean, the fact they haven't noticed this is not. But I would say all the major reviews have mentioned it, and that to me is I consider that a triumph for our campaign. We've got it right up there. Because they're not inclined to mention it. It's gone on so many times and never even been mentioned. And the fact that our dear friend Shutt is so kind of splenetic in his kind of defence of it.
Really?
And the man's just making a king size, arse of himself, frankly. You know what I mean? And it doesn't, to me, I'm thrilled with the reviews actually, because what the reviews have said is they like the Chinese play. They like the fact the RSC have done a Chinese play. We've put a very positive focus on our 3 East Asians in it. A lot of them have some very nice mentions, which is nice to see. Yeah. And they have all mentioned it. And apart from Ian, most of them haven't tried to have a go at us.
Tom Sutcliffe, though, that was a surprise.
Tom Sutcliffe?
Yeah. Tom Sutcliffe, who does Front Row.
Yes.
And he wrote in the Independent, wasn't it, the blog, where he was it was the sour grapes thing came up again.
I didn't see that, did I?
You did, you responded to it.
Did I? I've responded to so many things in the last 2 weeks, I can't remember anything. I mean, I would say this though, the theatre critics in this country are very much part of the establishment, and they are a lot of middle-aged, middle-class white males who are probably the least discriminated against demographic in the country. Yeah. It's interesting that apart from Anna, only one woman I think's reviewed it in the stage. And she based her whole, and I think women generally understand discrimination a lot more, And this is an interesting thing because a lot of people, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, maybe East Asian actors aren't very good. I remember 20 years ago there was a whole debate when I came out of drama about black actors, are they good enough? There was one theatre director who gloriously went in the press. I mean, nobody would do this now, and he went, yeah, well, black people can't do Shakespeare, it's not in their culture. You know what I mean? And there was, so that was 25 black actors. If we go back to the 40s, there were no working class actors. In the films, you see there's these terribly posh people trying to imitate Cockneys because working class people obviously couldn't speak properly or anything. Up until, I mean, even in the 60s, there were no women directing plays, designing them, writing them. Now they're everywhere. I mean, did all the women in Britain suddenly become incredibly talented? It only happens by us kicking the door down, and this is the point I'd make. But the fact that reviews are kind of here or there anywhere, I have to say. I mean, my understanding is it's not selling terribly well, which could be down to a whole lot of factors, though we probably haven't helped them.
But it was interesting how many gave it 4 stars, and that is a crock as well, because I'm sorry, on any level, it is just really
I have to
poor.
say, if you go and watch enough plays, you will develop a very healthy cynicism about the theatre critics, because if it's in a big theatre like the RSC, they generally just give it 3-4 stars. It's just a kind of thing. They just, this is great. Do you know what I mean? And they save their kind of fire to show they're discerning for very obvious kind of open goals. We don't have robust critics in this country. We don't have any Kenneth Tynans. They just don't exist anymore.
Oh, excuse me.
I was talking about the establishment, darling.
I wrote to the arts editor at The Guardian, basically saying it's a job.
Yeah. Well, you should have a review for The Guardian, that's my humble opinion, but
And I haven't even had an answer, I haven't even had a response. And I wrote around several ways to get to him, so...
I think the issue, though, is that the RSC still has immense power, and I think nobody should underestimate that in this room. In terms of, and I know that a lot of people, when we were campaigning, didn't come out, didn't vocalise for that reason, and we know with how things are progressing elsewhere in the world that the RSC does have immense power, and it makes people nervous. I mean, I was, tweeting, what's his name, Andy Dixon from The Guardian, regularly going, and he was going to interview Michael Boyd, wasn't he? And I was going, come on, what about this? What about this? Why don't you ask him about this? And he goes, but he's left. I was like, no, but he would have made those decisions. He would have done this. He would have blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, because critics have their own interests. The RSC is still a very powerful world-playing kind of level for the British public and for Britain as a whole. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that. And also, I think one of the problems with theatre reviewing as a culture is that there's no longer space. I mean, when Kenneth Tynan wrote reviews, he wrote a massive review. It was it's like an essay, right? Nowadays, theatre critics write, 2 or 3 short paragraphs that basically pressay what the play's about. It's not really a review.
Mention 2 or 3 of the leading actors.
Exactly. So there isn't a critical culture as there used to be, but I think the acknowledgement's important. The problem is that they didn't have space to say why it's important, why having 3 actors is not good enough. And I would have liked to have seen more of that within the critical kind of response.
I thought it was interesting that I think it was you were tweeting Lynn Gardner quite a lot, and she was saying, she was interested, and she's saying, I'll get back to you, I'll investigate this.
And that's only from our pressure, because I'm when the
more like she was really defending that.
But so she had a response to it, and then the Billington article review came out instead.
Yeah. So. She didn't review it. I think it would have been interesting to see her review it, or for her to write a piece on it. But maybe that's.
I generally think no. If more women had reviewed it, I think it would have been a completely different story.
The very people in the establishment who we have got in our sights were the ones who had the power of the word.
Absolutely. But going back to Amanda's point, that no one should underestimate this. One thing that doesn't, because as East Asians, a lot of us. With this awful kind of fatalism, it is a kind of a perverse Confucianism that everything's kind of the way it is and nothing. And people say, well, we've seen all this before. We haven't. This is the biggest theatre company in the world. I can't tell you. They were forced to backtrack, climb down, issue statements where they talk codswallop. This is extraordinary. It's a magnificent. It's probably the greatest moment in the history of East Asian theatre. That's probably not saying much,
except, right, I was quite shocked to see Victor Wong, who's this Canadian who's really feisty, and he's been writing to the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and just everybody wrote to the RSC, what are you doing? And he got this letter back from Nigel Hugill, and you read this and you realise there is no apology. And I think my reading of that letter, Dan and I aren't quite agreed on what's read. But I think they still can't bring themselves to say that the casting was wrong, and for me that's a mistake. So I am going to write him to ask him to clarify what the position is. I've been told by various BEAA chums that they're never going to do that in the middle of the run. But I am going to ask, because I would like to know. Well, there's been all this. You must have read a lot of what we're saying. Do you still stand by this casting decision?
I mean, my reading of it is, and I actually support Anna in writing to them. And if people feel the same in here, then go ahead and write and say all that. Because please do, absolutely. I think my interpretation of his letter is there's one paragraph where he's just can't say it. So what he does is reiterates the original thinking behind the casting. He doesn't, he does come with a glorious one, which is we do take this matter seriously, and I will not rest or something, until I see. So which is great. So that's something you can absolutely hold him to. I will not rest. We've made a pledge to kind of address this issue, and I will not rest, is what he says. Yeah. So There was something else profound I was going to say. Then never mind, it'll come back.
I think that all of this kind of does link into kind of institutional responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So can I ask you, what obligations do funders and the companies they fund have when it comes to ethnic representation in theatre arts, and are these obligations actually achievable?
Might go first again. I think personally they have enormous responsibility, or all of them. But I think particularly when it's the Arts Council and it's public money, it's taxpayers' money, it's our money. I think they need to get a lot. I don't like rules. I didn't get into a career in the arts to follow rules, and I don't like it personally, and it'd be great if people were kind of that inclined to do this stuff anyway, but you do need, people need pushing, because the situation in this, I mean, there was one particular theatre director who I got on Twitter who runs a building in Sheffield, if anyone's interested, and I tweeted him about this, and I said, have you seen I tweeted everybody, I said, have you seen this casting project? I said, blatant discrimination. And he came back with this kind of snotty response, which is I don't see that it's discrimination at all. And so I just tweet back my to me the game finisher question is, would it happen with black people? Straight away he came back, great, this debate is happening. And then he announced his next year's season, and bless him, he's a lovely chap. He's so enthusiastic. Oh, we've got My Fair Lady and all this. And so I tweeted him back again, being the irritating person I am, saying, will there be opportunities for East Asian actors? And he went, oh, very good. I'll get on my casting department. Having looked at his next year's season, and there are some new plays in there which obviously I can't comment on, but looking at the repertoire of plays that I see there, I'm struggling to see where he's going to get any black people in there, frankly. That is a major theatre in the region which is funded to the Guilds by the Arts Council. I believe the Arts Council's plan was to call them centres of excellence. And those centres of excellence generally are made up of lots of white TV stars, and they have enormous responsibility. But with the RSC, I mean, this, as I said at the beginning, that this was a particular set of circumstances we could exploit because they are funded so heavily by the taxpayer. If it was their own money, it's more difficult to make a case. But it's worth bearing in mind, that there is no law absolutely against a load of white people dressing up in grass skirts and bone necklaces and waving spears around and covering themselves in chocolate cake. There's no law against it. It's only social opprobrium that stops them doing that, and that's what we need to create around East Asians. We need to make a noise about it. We need to stop it by speaking out, basically.
But we started with the Channel 4. That was really
Channel
funny.
4
the Channel 4. We did.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. That's the kind of stuff we're good at, basically. But the more voices we have, the better. I have to say, because then we become a powerful voice.
It needs to start at the level of writing as well, though. I think, and what stories are represented and told. Because I wouldn't want to see any kind of quota system, either. Because then you get into the realm of statistics, and it's just ridiculous. Well, we have 3. That's good enough.
But you're only 0.something% of the population.
I think that is the big argument, actually, that keeps being thrown back in terms of the diversity initiatives. Is like, well, what proportion do you represent? And it's like,
I think they're already doing that. Actually,
they are.
They are doing that.
They are. Yeah. So that's the issue. But you have to make it not about proportional representation, but about equal opportunity, and therefore about talent.
And also the fact that we exist as a clear, we are clearly here. To not see us anywhere is just. I mean, did you remember Sherlock, the BBC reboot of the series, the second episode, Blind Banker? I was horrendous. I wrote about that as well at Madame Meow, if anyone's interested, and. It was incredible because they're all villainous. It was all Fu Manchu, like the beautiful girl dies like Anna May Wong. They go into Chinatown, even the shop assistants are sinister because they're... And it was unbelievable.
Yeah. I wrote several letters to the BBC about that one as well.
And then they gave them the BAFTA though, so we were complaining.
Yes, I know.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that perhaps has surprised the RSC is that there are a number of other public institutions who have been putting stuff out there And so, well, if they're doing it, then why can't we do it?
I think, though, that it's reached a kind of pressure point. I think this is my impression, is that the talent pool of East Asians, broadly defined, has reached a kind of critical mass now. And I think that public opinion is also moving in these directions. A lot of people, I think, feel disenfranchised in the current austerity environment in all sorts of different ways, and so that kind of also feeds into it. So I think there's a kind of, it's reaching a tipping point in a sense. So I think a lot of actors have also had enough, and I think that there is a kind of there's been a real move in the last, I'd say, year or so for more and more vocalization from more and more people, and that is what will put pressure on to maintain the diversity initiatives. And I think we've got some other choice projects coming up in the next few weeks that we'll be lobbying about, so please join in.
But to play kind of devil's advocate a bit, which I guess is the only kind of white male, is probably my job to do. But,
pigeonhole you, Ashley!
Is it possible that the controversy surrounding the Orphan of Zhao will actually discourage practitioners from involving themselves in a dialogue with East Asian forms of theatre? Or will they be is this too much of a hot potato for people to engage with? So can I ask the panel, actually, what would be the best model, the ideal model, or what would you actually like to see as a kind of means to encourage this?
Well, I have an interesting example because a friend of mine is doing the Royal Court. I think it's called like Unheard Voices. This year is Southeast Asia, so they're geographically really specific and good. And she's Indonesian of origin, but she's from Holland. So she's from the Clarissa Widia, so from the Netherlands. So when it came down to her, getting this opportunity and being within this kind of program, she was very torn on what, therefore, she begins to write about. This idea of, because I'm in this season of Unheard Voices, do I write about an Indonesian family? And initially, when she submitted her play, it wasn't, and there was no sort of ethnicity given on any of the characters. It was sort of neutral in some way. And then eventually she realized, as she redrafted, that I don't know if there was a kind of pressure on her from it definitely wasn't from the institution. Might have been from some of the other writers within it. I don't know. But
probably me.
She just, but she felt that it became much more of a Dutch Indonesian family that she was writing about within this piece. So there's a kind of I feel very torn on this. What story do people represent as East Asian artists, and not necessarily just actors? What stories are told? Do we only want to write about issues that pertain to us, and then eventually start beginning to think about closing the community in, which isn't a good thing either in terms of artistic representation. So I don't have a best model to encourage this.
I think it's interesting to compare that with the American experience, where they had, they have a huge critical mass there, and histories are different and so on, but they have that kind of first generation, you write about your immigrant stories, and then you get the representation, then you write about being Asian American, as in second generation, and then you gain the critical visibility, and you get the theatre companies, you put the plays on, you get the visibility, and then you start writing whatever you want, and it becomes much. I mean, that's the model that they have followed, to be honest. That's the trajectory it's taken. I'm not suggesting that that's the only model, but that's what they have achieved quite successfully. But I would hate, as you say, to pigeonhole people into, you must write in relation to your ethnic background. I think that's I think there's models, and I think it's an individual process, to be honest. I think you can't have a model that would work. I think it's very individualised in that sense. Yeah.
Would it frighten people? I mean, it might. I have to say, though, this is possibly controversial, I think they do need to be a bit frightened. They're frightened of black people. They're terrified of them. They're terrified. There's no way you're going to get a white actor going on stage with chocolate cake on his face. I keep saying chocolate cake because Stanislavski in An Actor Prepares famously swears himself with chocolate cake. It's a glorious image. But that's not going to happen anymore. And like I say, it's only down to social opprobrium that's not going to happen anymore.
I guess the question is, in relation to this, what is there to lose? If the situation is so bad for East Asian actors, what is there to lose by putting them off? Because you're not getting it, the access barriers are so high anyway, why not? There is a danger, I think, that people will go, we'll just go to China. And you see this a lot, right? That Royal Opera House is training, they're having these technician training sessions, National Theatre of Scotland, exchanges between Chinese and Scottish playwrights. And there is that danger that we're going to go to China, as in Greater China, and British East Asians will get wiped out of the equation. And then you think, well, we'll just import it. Okay, now we know there's no money for that, but the Chinese will pay. There is a sense in New York on Broadway, there's an open acknowledgement that the big Chinese ambition is to get a Chinese musical, all Chinese cast, on Broadway. That is their big cultural ambition, and they are pouring money into it. Yeah. And it's currently the Peony Pavilion version, whatever it is. Various people have looked at it, various actors I know have worked on it. So there is that kind of, well, maybe we could just bypass everybody, but then is there anything to lose?
No, I will say that actually though, in terms of them being too scared to engage, the general feeling I get from the theatrical community at large is they're kind of behind us. I've had a couple of exchanges with people who, it's difficult for them to come out in public and criticise the Royal Shakespeare Company, but they've said that they agree with us.
But there's still this filtering process.
Yeah.
The first show I ever did was with Moulin, the old incarnation of Moulin Theatre, and I took something called Susie Wrong Human Canon to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 1994. Then did a national tour the next year. Got my first television. So I think I'm the first British Chinese comedian to do British television. There are then these long gaps because no one will take you on. I think my model is probably the Ken Campbell model, who actually said that he thought that public funding was the death of good theatre. I mean, I wouldn't say no to funding. I would love funding, but somebody like me doesn't get it because I don't fit people's models. That's why I think I should get funding.
No, that's what we have to change. I
did Steampunk Opium Wars this February, by some fluke. They were doing they're opening this new gallery, Traders, which was dealing with the East India Company. So I was asked to co-curate a series of events and also make something. And it turned out to be the Steampunk Opium Wars, which did really well. So when I have done stuff, I actually have. Susie Wrong, got press like that. My press file was brilliant. But you're up against things like when there was that Chinese in Britain thing a few years ago, where I think Prince Andrew was one of the patrons of it, and we know now that the somebody who was with CAS, in fact, was a consultant with that. And we saw the email where she told a white woman who's been working with our East Asian companies, told them in no uncertain terms they were not to have British East Asian theatre and productions and performance. It should all be imported from China. So when we're getting stabbed in the back from people who do reach these positions of power. I understand she's got herself some job in a university in Shanghai in China now. So we do have people who are making careers off our backs while we are left with trying to stick crumbs together.
I think but the question that you posed was about these companies engaging with East Asian forms of theatre, and I would say that I don't really know that the RSC was all that interested in specifically engaging with Chinese theatre. I think it seems so purely instrumental here about discovering China at this point in time, because I don't see these big companies going and doing a no play or a kabuki play or adapting these stories from Japan or Korea or the Philippines or Thailand or anything. It was specifically Chinese at a time when China is in the public eye for this reason.
A lot of disposable income.
And I don't think they are all that interested in engaging with East Asian forms of theatre to begin with.
I think it's also perhaps a lot to do with, I know we've kind of already talked about it, but I think this is very clearly about not only cultural diplomacy but kind of economic. And that the reason why I think there is a very serious, I think, kind of threat to British East Asian performance specifically is that economically Chinese artists are more beneficial. They can kind of create those kind of cultural and economic links.
I think that was on the website of the RSC. They had that dual language campaign as well, which was targeted for Chinese audiences, Chinese tourists, and that kind of stuff. So they're clearly trying to spoon them up in that way.
And aren't they also supposed to be taking productions to China as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they have already. I think when I was at the Shanghai Dramatic Arts Centre in 2006, they just had one there.
And now they're taking Matilda to America, where I think they're going to be given quite a warm reception, because there's one kid who is East Asian. Out of how big is that?
Oh, it's a musical, it's huge.
It's pretty big.
So one East Asian kid.
But when I saw it, I think he was the only ethnic kid in it.
No, I think he probably was, yeah.
So it's even worse. It's worse even. So they haven't learned anything then from what we've just put them through.
Well, I think they'd already cast that before we put them through it.
Can I ask the panel a kind of final question before we open up to discussion? Kind of what should happen next? Where do we go from here? I mean, I kind of embedded within that is, I suppose, a question about the kind of lack of opportunities, I suppose, for British East Asian performers. But what should happen next?
Well, we're doing a festival. The British East Asian artists are aiming to put on a festival where Daniel said the other night, if I see one long sleeve in there.
I think...
No, I agree. I'm totally with you, mate.
No long sleeves.
No, long sleeves are great in context, but what we do have to get away from it, I think, is this... We fall into this trap, I think, of what I call kind of heritage theatre, where we invite, you know, the nice British people to come and watch us do our flower dance, you know, and you know, it's, you know, when you think, okay, when I left drama school, there was a black company called Timber. They were doing August Wilson plays. They were doing Ghost by Ibsen with an all-black cast. Okay, then you had South Asians doing. There was Easter's East. Before that was a play at the Royal Court Theatre upstairs, and I tried to go and see it. I was very young at the time. I think it was called Blood or something. It sounded amazing. I couldn't get a ticket for love nor money, but it was all about, you know, it was tough, controversial stuff. We did do that briefly with Mulan. We did, and we need to get back to that. And I think because what Amanda hit on this before. One of the reasons as well why it came up at the time we did. I do think for the first time ever we do have a decent talent pool of East Asian actors coming through, and I think, you know, and you can feel it. It's fermenting. It's kind of, you know, it's ready to come first. But what we've had for the last 15 years is the Arts Council funded one company only, a particular way of working, whether you like that or not. But what you know, there are various events being planned, which the Arts Council are kind of organising with Equity next year. Education events for casting directors and theatre directors, and networking events for actors to engage with industry decision makers. It's interesting because I think we're always called, you know, people say only 0.8% work with the population. We're maybe a small minority group, but I actually think we're the most diverse in many ways. The diversity that exists amongst East Asians in this country is enormous, and that's never... What you see on TV generally is either very, very Chinese or very, very Japanese. And when I say very, very Chinese, very, very Japanese, we're talking about kind of 1950s antiquated, and not even that. I mean, I think it's something they saw in a 1950s film. You know, the way, you know. I think we've all been up. You know, you get the script and there's a line like, "My father is a very proud man." You know what I mean? You know, and it just, you know, we're kind of denied the kind of. you know, when you see the central characters in TV dramas, theatre plays, you know, these characters are kind of witty, scabrous, charismatic, sexy. All the things these Asians just aren't allowed to do, frankly. Just not. You know, we're dull, earnest, and worthy, basically.
Can I put in that a really sort of depressing, pessimistic point though? When you have a city like, or a city like Vancouver in a country like Canada, that is very multicultural. When my experience was really similar, despite the fact that we are a Pacific Rim city, and we, you know, in Richmond at least, we made up nearly 45% of the population. So. If a city like that can still be, you know, when my auditions were for, it's, you know, it's not my father is a very proud man, but it's drug dealer or scientist or, so there, you know, when that still exists in a city like Vancouver, then what happens?
I would agree with that. You know, that there is a common misconception amongst East Asian actors here who say, oh, I want to go to America, it's much better there. But having been there, you've only got to get off the plane in LA or San Francisco to know, whoa, we are woefully underrepresented in American film and TV. You know, it really is. You know, the Chinatown in San Francisco is huge. You know, it's probably the size of Barnet. You know, I mean, so yeah, but I do think that there's a kind of worldwide thing, well, I suppose in the Western world, there's APAC in America, you know, Bromwich has started one in Australia. I think if we all work together and pressure, I think we can improve things, I think.
The other thing I'd like to say is, given all the talent that I think there is now, it would be great to not necessarily always rely on the major institutions, and I think the festival is part of this, to kind of, and I know we've only had one company, and I think there's been a certain reliance on that company and an expectation, perhaps unrealistically, that they should represent everybody, and it's not possible. So I think that now there's the talent, and now there's the opportunity as well to create what work ever anybody wants to create, and to be more entrepreneurial and how that's put on. So I know we have to have the Arts Council, we have to have 10% of whatever it is from another institution to apply for a grant, etc. But if there are ways that, you know, we can privately fundraise. I mean, I did when I worked in American theatre, that I spent a lot of time doing those kind of fundraising activities for Asian American theatre companies, and it was a lot of work, but they raised the money, and then you can go to whatever theatre company you want to say, okay, now we've got the money, we need a bit more for the grant, but if we just even give you this, will you just support us? So I think there's ways of being a bit more imaginative in how we put things on, and not always having that expectation that we should look to the major institutions. They should, I'm not saying they shouldn't represent everybody, they should, but I think that there's a performance ecology, if you want to put it that way, the system overall that needs to be thought about as well.
Okay. What I think we should do is open up the questions to the floor, and I just need to inform everybody that this is being recorded and will be placed online just for your information.
Well, no, actually, no, I have got another. I've got the bag, the little.
It's got the batteries too.
Yeah, no, there's another one. There's a spare. In fact, if you just look in there, Chow, you might be able to swap. I know there's one spare. Sorry.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yeah. Hi. I'm wondering what you think about what is the state of multiculturalism in Britain this year in 2012? About, like you said, about we've hit this pressure point. What is it about perhaps the Olympics and the Royal Shakespeare Festival, the Globe to Globe season, all these events that have happened this year, what effect have they had on this debate?
I think another one, enormous one. I think it's just, you're right. You know, coming out of the summer, where the Olympics and the Paralympics particularly kind of elevated disabled people to kind of front page celebrities, and it was such a kind of jamboree. You know, such a glorious kind of thing. You feel like the RSC meanies went and killed the Olympic spirit. You know what I mean? It's interesting that the Globe Fest was very interesting because I did see the Mandarin Richard III there, you know, and one of the defences, people in defence of the Royal Shakespeare Company would say, well, it's just like Chinese people doing Shakespeare. It's not, because that Richard III was performed in Mandarin with Chinese actors in Chinese costumes, with Chinese props, Chinese music. They weren't in doublet and hose, you know, with pointy beards, trying to be Elizabethan Englishmen. which is the equivalent of what the RSC are doing. So yeah, I do think that's had a big effect. You know, we're much more global now. We're much more worldly, and I think we want to see each other on the stage. We do, you know.
I think that the Olympics discursively, you know, was putting the multiculturalism forward, but I felt the most despicable xenophobia during during the Olympics.
Yeah.
And it generally happens. It's like a 4-year cycle where then suddenly the media will be all about the Chinese other during the summertime. So I'd say that kind of ideologically the Olympics works as this big event, but in terms of actual practice, no. It's in terms of East Asia, it's still very far behind.
I think also the theatre landscape in the summer, I think Wild Swans, I think having Benedict Wong in Hamlet, all these things were kind of, I started to feel, things are shifting, and I think David Land's been an amazing force, but one man can't do it alone.
He didn't arrive at Hamlet by an easy route,
no.
That has to be said.
But he's not, he can't do it, he can't do everything, right? But I think nonetheless, things were starting to move, and I kind of thought, maybe we're going to turn a corner now. But no. Just that immense disappointment, really, that all this potential hadn't been harnessed.
With the Olympics, I thought that it was quite interesting. You had the amazing opening ceremony that I think just, you know, we could not believe that we were all expecting it to be Drost. The closing ceremony did not disappoint. Because there we had this 2 weeks where it was like Danny Boyle carved out dream time for us, where we could remember what it was like to love each other and for this wonderful atmosphere. And there we had, was it BMW and Kate Moss and everybody putting, you know, whereas we'd had Isambard, Kingdom Brunel and the opening Shakespeare, it then ended with sort of Winston Churchill, and it was saying, here plebs, you've had your 2 weeks and it's back to what it was. So that's one thing. With the Paralympics, you had the same thing happening. It's marvellous. Yes, they were stars, but now you still have ATOS still doing what they're doing, still devastating disabled people. With the xenophobia, I actually wrote a piece in The Guardian about that. Ye Shiwen, 16-year-old young girl, branded a cheat and a liar on nothing but Claire Balding's horrible prejudice, because she kicked it off, if you remember. The Leonard, the American coach, he just took the ball and ran with it. You know, you hardly ever saw Asian people. Every time we did well in something, there was this sourness. So whatever they present, it's all show. You know, it's the reality is something different that we have to keep on having a go at.
Thank you. Questions about that?
Yeah, I have a question kind of about the East Asian active dilemma. When we have these pieces like Orphan of Zhao or Miss Saigon that is very white-centric and kind of this Orientist kind of view, if you were offered a role in it, would you take it? Because
I'm thinking of auditioning for Miss Saigon now. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's we have so little opportunity, but then we are propagating these stereotypes and this Orientist art form.
Well,
so that's kind of the dilemma.
Well, I say no to stuff. I mean, I was offered a primetime Saturday night thing. Richard Hammond of Jeremy Clarkson's sidekick. They came to me saying they wanted someone to play an artist, and it was like a sort of candid camera thing where somebody was set up and they moved my artwork, and you don't realise it's artwork. So it's having a go at modern art as well, and I said no. Top Gear, Jeremy Clarkson, no. And you know, Saturday night prime times, because we can actually say no to some stuff. And then someone also pointed out, well, of course, you being like, you know, Chinese origins, they're probably having a go at Yoko Ono as the sort of mad foreign artist, and I was thinking, oh yes, that's the point. I'm probably being set up here as well. So I would say I got a call back from Miss Saigon when it first opened here, because I was so excited. Wow, an opportunity for me to get out and do my thing and sing. I'll actually get to sing. And I would have done it then, but then a few years later, when it was on its last legs, they approached my agent and said, "Can Anna sing? If Anna sings, she gets the part. There's an older, because I've never seen it. There's an older hooker."
yeah. She sings "Movie in My Mind."
Yeah, I said,
Yeah,
and I said no to that as well. So we can with Orphan of Zhao. I think I probably would have said yes, but I hope that there would be some sort of debate, about what it was about.
Can I just kind of put the flip side on it? I'm not necessarily just playing devil's advocate. I mean, when Lea Salonga was cast in Miss Saigon, I mean, she was plucked from literally obscurity, and she's become this huge, iconic figure, an inspiration to millions of Filipinos, Filipino-Americans, Asian Americans, to kind of aspire for that dream. That's a very stereotypical role. But now she has the power to do something like Allegiance. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Allegiance, but the big Japanese-American musical that's touring the States and is about to probably go to Broadway and is being phenomenally successful, selling out to all these kind of traditional white regional audiences. So I think just to flip it, I'm not necessarily agreeing, but just to flip the coin, because I think the old argument, when the Miss Saigon controversy first kicked off, there was a big thing about Jonathan Pryce obviously playing the engineer, and we're going to have the Tim Minchin question pop up again with this production that they're looking to restage. But the question was, well, what kind of parts are we fighting for, really? That was the famous quote. I can't remember, it's from an academic, I can't remember who said it. But, I mean, it's a dilemma. So
I was a fool to turn it down.
I don't know, you could have been there so long.
I don't want to turn it into Miss Saigon defense, but I do think it's really interesting as a piece because it's a kind of this flat, globalized language in terms of the songs that people sing. It's all in an American accent, and it's all, the same kind of poetry that all the characters. And because it's sung through, there's kind of no sorts of distinctions. And then there's that long section in the middle of the first, or the end of the first act, where it's kind of just set in Vietnam and Thailand. And it is Kim and the engineer and Tui sort of self-determining this drama for themselves. So it's an interesting piece in that way. But just to pick up on Lea Salonga, though, I think the apparatus around Miss Saigon is completely Orientalist, because it begins to... Because it was this idea that she was plucked from obscurity, but she wasn't. They constructed that because she had a TV show in the Philippines. Manila is a city of 25 million people. It's huge. People watch her already. So she was already a star. And then if you watch that video for her auditioning for it with Heitner and Claude Michel Schoenberg and all those people, they staged this kind of, white men behind the panel, and she's wearing white, and she has sampaguita in her hair. She's this very young girl, and they're staging this kind of Star is Born. We're discovering you, and she was on Wogan with Jonathan Pryce, and she had to wear the costume and he didn't. So they've constructed the apparatus around that rather than
But nonetheless, I mean, there's other precedents around this. Kind of when they initially did Pacific Overtures, that first casting of Pacific Overtures, they went to every Chinatown and every ethnic community in the States to find that cast. So the idea that there's no talent, is completely fabricated. It's an image, So I agree. So I may have fallen trap to that, but yes.
That's always a nonsense. I think most of us have probably turned down some really awful, unspeakably awful rubbish. I've often actually just not bothered to go to the casting because. Being Hapa, mixed race, what you end up getting told usually is, well, you weren't Chinese enough, which is the most frustrating thing you can ever hear. And that I will say, it's a problem for actors generally. You have to be typecast first in order to get cast, And I knew a Scottish actor years ago, and all he ever did was, I'm fed up with going for Scottish parts all the time, man. I'm fed up with it. Do you know what I mean? And usually the way it works is if you are enough of an archetype, you can turn up enough times and do that, then you're like Simon Russell Beale's is the classic example. People go about the fact he's portly and he's played Hamlet and Macbeth and stuff. But when he first began, all he did was play Cam Fox. Do you know what I mean? Because he did it so well, he put himself in a position where he could say, naturally, I want to play this. So I think if it's a half decent role, it's going to, you know, it's better to get inside the system and try and change it, the lobstones from the outside forever.
Question?
I was just going to say, it's what you were saying about, you know, not being Chinese enough. I think what you were saying earlier about needing to reflect about the reality of Britain. And the reality of Britain is that 1 in 10 kids are mixed race.
Yeah.
1 in 5 kids are mixed race. And, you know, and it's not about having to play Chinese or Thai or Lao, but maybe about having to play being British and being on that, you know, complex multicultural identity. And it seems that that's not even, you know, that isn't seem to be anywhere even on the horizon.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would say mixed race is something the entertainment industry in this country just struggles with, full stop. They like you to, you know, they're worried you're going to confuse the audience or confuse you. You know, they just don't.
Actually said that, and he said it would confuse the audience.
Yeah, they absolutely worry about that. And if you're playing Chinese takeaway man, they want you to look like Chinese takeaway man. They don't want the audience going, well, is that guy? They don't. They don't. Oh, that guy looks interesting. They don't want you to look interesting.
But Jay posted that casting call for actor must look mixed race. And you're like, what is that?
I think for certain TV commercials that are going to get broadcast in Asia, they do like it. They absolutely love it. They want that Eurasian happer look. They love that, you know, because it's kind of not like them, but it's not too white to be weird. So they kind of like it there. But in terms of TV, theatre, drama, they like you to be something definite.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I was wondering whether the 3 British station actors in the production have intervened in this debate at all.
I did try and contact one of them who I know quite well, and a couple of times, and he didn't respond. I've heard mixed reports. I think there was a certain mischief-making faction in the RSC who tried to make out that they were feeling rejected by that, which is not. We have expressed nothing but love and admiration. And we've bigged up all their reviews, and we're very proud of them in that sense. I have to say, when I was working there, if this had been going on, I would have absolutely loved it. You know, I can't think of anything more fun than being in that building, you know, being the ethnic grunt and having all my brothers and sisters raging at the gates. I would have enjoyed that so much, personally. But that's
I was going to ask, I haven't seen the production, the character of the dog. Is he a character or is it a special effect?
It's brilliant. Can I say, I really, really loved the dog.
We heart dog.
Because it's this huge, and I almost wanted to sort of tickle its tummy, you know. But it's this big ferocious, and its eyes glow red, and the way they do it, you do forget that there are people working it. So one half of my brain was, this is just being done by the ethnics, and the other side, wow, that's really brilliant.
But is it an integral part of
He dies earlier. He belongs to Tuan Gu, the villain. So it opens with the scene with the dog that's being trained to go for the noble wearing the purple robe. And that's what happens, but then it gets killed quite quickly. So it's only in it for like a scene or two.
You'd win Crufts for that, wouldn't you?
I wanted it.
No, it's just interesting the way, because in some of the publicity around this, or some of the stuff you guys have written, the way that you talked about how the East Asian actors were classed as the maid and
the dog.
Puppeteers.
You're not conscious of the people doing it, so that they are absolutely diminished. You know, it's not just speaking through.
But it's not
Muraku
style
with being cast as a puppeteer wasn't quite as.
Well, no. The only thing I'd say about that, the RSC, because the RSC used it in one of their defences. You know, Greg Doran. This is not true. They're not playing minor roles at all. Now it turns out all the critics have said they're playing minor roles. They've used that word minor. What I said initially is they don't appear to be playing protagonists, which is all I ever said. But But what the RSC then said, Greg Doran went, well, no, the Maid's integral, you know, she sacrifices herself in 2.5 pages.
And it was key, wasn't it? It was key.
And he went, and 2 of them are operating this dock, and it's a marvellous piece of puffery. It's a fact. Now, the Royal Shakespeare Company's branding is world-class classical theatre. It's not world-class puppetry. So if I'm going to be in a world-class classical theatre, I want to be up there speaking iambic pentameter like the white man, you know. That's why I don't want to be operating a dog puppet, frankly. I mean, if it's part of a number of things I'm doing throughout the night, and my other big bit is to do huge soliloquies and look like a geezer in the spotlight, then great. But if that's my main function, I've got a problem with that.
Also,
personally.
one of the things that Paul pointed out was that if all the characters must be
he used the word key, yeah.
Because if they're not, that means it's overwritten anyway, which I thought, you know, sort of ended that argument.
It became very problematic as well, because they were saying, oh, we chose the best actor for the role, and then it becomes, well, what are the skill sets?
Yeah.
And, you know, people actually did spotlight searches. Michelle did spotlight searches, didn't she, to say, oh, actually, their skills aren't listed as puppetry, and their skills aren't listed as these things. But
the only moment that an East Asian actor got to shine was the scene at the end, where he returns as the ghost. And his voice, and I have to say, there was a stillness and a charisma to Chris that was absolutely wonderful. And I thought, I can't believe you got this guy who is so strong on stage, and you see him just at this end bit where he comes back as the ghost of the baby who was killed. And you haven't, I don't know, has he been cast in any of the others with a decent role? I bloody hope
no,
so.
He's playing next to nothing in Boris Godunov, and at the moment he's doing nothing at all in Life of Galileo. It's also known that Susan Momoko Hindu, who plays the Maid, is also a very strong actress. But there's a kind of imperialist thing that you wouldn't get the white actress playing the Maid to her princess.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I'm saying?
It'd be interesting to think again the study round, because I think Chris is playing
the orphan, yeah.
So to see how these minor roles are being.
Oh, is he understudying?
He's understudying the orphan, yeah.
Shall we will have to
go down again.
I think it's a £5, I think. The understudy runs a £5, I think.
Is it? No, I was just thinking of, what's his name, Jake, the actor who...
Yeah. You weren't impressed.
No, I just wanted to give an actor a chance.
I just want to commend you all for giving momentum to this event and making it an event, actually. But I would particularly to ask you to say a little bit more about the coalitions you thought could have been forged better between the South Asian community of actors and the black actors. What could they have done to give support, to lend their support to this movement?
I think as the Americans did and as Tamasha did, really, just moral support, issued statements, and just come on their Facebook pages to say, well done, we support you, this is great, and to share maybe share some experience. This is what happened to us when we were going through this phase. Maybe you could learn from this. But there's just been this resounding silence.
I sent this blurb about this event through the South Asian websites. And they came back to me and they did say that they have sent it through their Twitter, Facebook websites, but other than not get back in touch with you?
No. Tamasha is the only one.
Tamasha they issued a very strong statement. Individuals, my fellow Equity Minority Ethnic Members Committee member Sunita Sims, who's South Asian, wrote a very, very strong statement on the RSC Facebook page. I was disappointed in the likes of Tara, Kali, I have to say, because the other thing I would say is that they're funded to be Asian theatre companies. Now, Asia's actually a big continent, you know, and for too long we've been kind of carved out of that, you know what I mean? And I would like them to have been more vocal, but there's plenty of stuff coming up, isn't there? So
there's more chances people to get involved.
It's fine to arrive late at the party, but to arrive.
Because also it's not just about solidarity, which we would obviously like anyway, but the fact that I think that this is, if they can screw us over. I think because some of the arguments we've been having have been quite scary. You know, on my mate Will Howley's Facebook thread, they were talking about, well, what's wrong with the black and white minstrel show? And I just thought, I can't believe we're starting to hear this. No, but like 10 years ago, no one would have dared.
As good as God Billy in A Passage to India. You get all that, you know.
But maybe it's because the fight for the South Asian and the black communities is kind of over. And they're kind of there, and therefore these things can start to maybe gain momentum. Well, yeah, but it feels that way, right? Sometimes.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll say no then.
No, I think they're underrepresented as well, personally. Yeah.
They're underrepresented, but they've been through the kind of overtly political phase.
Yeah. But they have to be vigilant, because that poison is still there coming from people who would like to take it back.
I went to the Black to Q&A, and it sounds just the same as this. I mean, they're facing the same issues that East Asians are. They're like the token black guy.
Yeah, sure.
They do, yeah, absolutely.
I don't think you can. I think all the minorities should have some consolidation with you guys.
Definitely.
It's actually not so much of a question, it's more of a point, if that's okay. In all of this, I mean, I've been in the industry for nearly as long as Daniel. So he's one of my forebears. At the end of the day, whatever colour you are, whether you've come from the black, Asian, or East Asian / Chinese community, that's one camp, and then you've got the host nation. And to me, when I've read all these things, and I'm totally on board, you guys know that, is you either get it or you don't. If you're part of the community of colour in the creative arena, you either get it that there is an issue, and there's always part of you that is trying to cause change, bring change, challenge change, raise the issues of change, and you get it, or you don't and you settle. And I'm not talking about people just coming out in early careers. I remember waitress, prostitute, nurse, resounding castings when I first came out of drama school, and then I started to say no, not really, no, and just not go, or then I went through the go because I haven't met them before, and then in the end it was like, well, no, I'm not going to go because it's a waste of my time, money, effort, resources, and creativity that's basically going to get slapped in the face and thrown on the floor. And I'm worth more than that, my creativity. I didn't train at drama school and sacrifice everything and have no support from family to kind of have that kind of shit dished out to me now. Too old and long in the tooth to accept it. And if you're, so we have an issue going on within our own communities, because you'll get people who come over, you'll get people who are a bit more naive, let's say, who are still prepared to stick in the rut, perpetuate stereotypes just because they get work. And I understand that at one level, because we want to earn a crust, we want to exercise our creativity, but we have to draw a line somewhere, and we have to, carry on riding this wave of critical mass that we've now, assumed and accumulated. Because now is the time. Now is the time. We can't undo what's just happened in the last 6 weeks. We can't it is now. It is now. So you either jump on or you bye. And then for the host nation, again, I love seeing Amanda repeatedly and Ashley repeatedly. Not because you're you've got a fascination with kind of but because you're intelligent enough to actually see what's going on here, and you can discuss it from a objective and intelligent point of view, and you bring something of value, which I really appreciate. So for the host nation, again, you either get it or you don't, and for the majority, they don't, and they don't want to, and then the people in positions of power and influence, it's not just the writers, it's actually decision makers, so producers, commissioners, people who hold purse strings, and then ultimately central government, who don't have the same regard for the arts in this country as they do in America. So that purse shrinks all the time. And then it has to get spread out very, very, very thin across every arts arena. And then, even more insulting, we are lumped together, culture and media, culture and sport. We are not sport. I mean, would the sportsmen, the sports people, how do they feel? It's not fair on them, it's not fair on us. So you can see up the chain of command, you're right, it's always going to be political and economical. I remember, you had this whole voice and visibility of black creativity, voice and visibility of Asian creativity, and then Eastern Europe opens, you get the whole EU issue, and suddenly there's all these Eastern European storylines. An entire people group, an entire community, the Chinese community, is completely bypassed, and that has not gone back, that has not. And that's down to politics and economics, because of what's happening in Europe, and it's in the news, therefore it gets put into drama, because you think it's current. Well, then you're basically saying you have nothing to offer. It's exactly what they've all said. You've got nothing to offer, you've got no substance or depth, we can't possibly draw from you, you can't possibly have anything to offer to British society. We're going to keep you in a safe box that we can manage and we can understand, because we're afraid. And because the purse strings are getting so tight, we don't risk losing our little quarter, penneth worth at all. So you either get it or you don't get it, whether you're in the creative arena or you're not. I think for me it boils down, that's the bottom line.
But I don't think it's that, I would hate to think it's that rigid. I mean, I have my in-laws who went to see an Oscar Wilde play, and they had 2 South Asians in it, and they were like, "Oh, they were good," and they didn't mean it in that. They don't mean it in the different generations as well. They don't mean it in that way. So then we're coming to this, and they're like cutting out everything from all the papers for me and going, "Oh, there's this, and they're connecting this." And then they're like, "Well, why is that important?" So my husband's going, "Well, if you felt like this, if you were this, what would you think?" And it's a question of kind of almost leading people through some of those steps, because rather than necessarily expecting them to get it. Do you see what I mean? I know that there's.
Maybe I'm talking about the layer of personnel who are who've been in the dialogue.
Yeah.
Whether it's government culture ministers.
Sure.
I mean, we all know the current, Minister of Culture.
Oh God.
She has never had any affiliation, any experience, any relationship. No. She has absolutely zero experience with the arts. Yeah. And yet she's the minister, she's
a cutter. She's
just
a cutter.
Tree. I mean, that is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. So I take that back, that it's not as black and white, I can't blush, and maybe I'm painting a very fat, brush
Oh no,
stroke.
I know that we need to do it.
But for me, it is still.
But I think
quite strong charcoal grain,
it's important though, because that's how we build the critical mass. Because I'd be really interested to hear about the kind of South Asian and what they were saying at Blackter, to see how can we pull people in, right? How can we make this, fight for other fights,
I think Amanda's right. Lynn Gardner's a very good example of that. We got Lynn Gardner earlier. Let's say when the More Light thing was on, and I pressured her on to keep the debate on, to keep it up, because they close it after 3 days, and she gave me this rather snotty reply, basically, and now she kind of responds to my tweets, and she's like, "Oh, do let me know about the event. I'd love to come and cover it next year." And and she actually said, "I hope this gets more coverage. It deserves to."
So we can shift people.
We definitely can. Yeah. But what Irene was saying about the producers and commissioners is absolutely right. What those people often do is to pass the buck to the writers, and it's the writers. Now, having so supposedly writers of the power. I made a film last year for BBC Writers' Room as a writer, and I felt anything but powerful, I have to say. They made it very clear, I was making the film for them, and I felt, I have to say, I got very angry with enormous rows, and I don't know if they've forgiven me yet, but it was quite disempowering, I felt.
I think the interesting thing, comparing this with APAC in New York, because when I met them and talked to them, they wanted to find out where within the ladder, whether it was casting directors, writers, producers, they want to find out where the problem was. And I think that they found the problem was with the directors, if I remember. I made some notes, and I can't quite remember, so don't hold me to that. But for them, they found it was a particular issue that meant that they could target their energies there. So I think that's something to just throw out there into the mix.
We have time for one more question. Sorry, we have. Okay, sorry, go on.
I was kind of on that note with that kind of searching for the issue. I mean, I think from the writer's perspective, there also needs to be the producer, and we need more East Asian producers who actually put stuff on.
Yeah.
I'm trying to produce a play, and I'm trying to get it kind of high profile, and I'm having a hard time getting the artistic directors of these theaters to buy into it because it's not commercial, because it's East Asian, which then kind of brings up what we said earlier about the Orphan of Zhao not selling tickets, which really worries me, and then they're just going to say, look, a Chinese play is not commercial, and therefore just kind of propagates.
In fairness, I don't think the entire season's it's not a terribly commercial season. You know, they're doing a Pushkin as well. It's all a bit, you know, there's no huge stars in it either. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
But then I compare that with Wild Swans, which was hugely commercially successful, sellout.
Sure. Enormous. Yeah. They were wishing they could run that for another 4 weeks by the end of it.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think we should perhaps draw to a close. One thing I should say, which I didn't say at the beginning, was two members of the panel couldn't be here today. Lucy Sheen and Lynette Goddard made both their apologies. I'm sure Lucy in particular is here in spirit, if not in person. And I'd also very much like to thank Anna for stepping in to replace Lucy, as it were. So can I invite you all to thank our panelists?